Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Life Wrap Up. I'm Joe Samriego, and with me we have Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast, Ben Schneider from Grid Encore and NASCAR.info, Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight, preparing for a busy week of Indianapolis 500 coverage, and a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in us each and every month. Once you signed up to be one of our investors through Patreon, you'll get some Grid Network stickers mailed out to you and a thank you letter. And of course, you can do Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat, $10 or more, and that'll get you some Grid Network stickers as well as YouTube membership. And simplest way to support us, hit the bell icon, subscribe to us right here on YouTube, share with your family and friends that love motorsports. And of course, one of the big things, gridranking.com, all the latest articles from our team covering motorsports. And we have a lot to cover today on the show. Alex, Ben, let's get started with Darlington. Gave plenty of drivers a Darlington stripe, and Brad Keselowski, he carried the Stars and Stripes after 400 miles at the track, too tough to tame. He is the winner, ending a long winless streak, and the first Ford driver to lock himself into the playoffs. Alex, how much of a weight has been lifted off Brad Keselowski?
First of all, wow, what a hot streak we're on for NASCAR right now. After last week, closest finish in history, to now today, just another banger of a race. And Brad Keselowski getting this win for Ford, that's awesome. It's been a long time coming, 110 races, I believe, since Talladega 2021. First time as a owner driver for him getting this win. First time the 6 car has won a race since 2011. Before that, the last time in non-Talladega or Daytona, it was 2005 Kansas, and that was the first race I ever attended in person. So Kansas had been going there since '05, but the 6 car getting that win, huge deal. And for Brad Keselowski, this is a pretty big weight. It's kind of been bothering him that he hasn't been able to pull off a win. He's been so close so many times. There's a couple second place finishes just this season. Looked like he's going to get a couple. Just never really happened until today, when the two guys in front of him end up taking each other out. It kind of just cleared the way for Brad Keselowski today. And honestly, he was kind of owed one after a while. And not only for him is weight been lifted off of him, it's also lifted off of Ford. Ford ends their winless streak. Man, that was hard to watch for Ford, just constantly losing so many races this year. But they finally got it, and now they're going to be stopped. They're not going to get asked that question anymore. When is Ford going to win a race this year? They've won one, and now they can continue the season.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I was trying to remember if I've even been a part of this network the last time Brad Keselowski won. I guess I had just joined in April of 2021 or May, whenever it was, when he got that win at Talladega. He was still with Team Penske, and so it's been a long time since he's won a race as a driver. Obviously, he's won a few as an owner with Chris Buescher, and my goodness, you have to feel for him today as well. 2 weeks in a row where he had victory in his grasp and just couldn't quite close the deal. Obviously, losing out on the closest finish ever last week, and then now this week having to deal with Reddick. But Alex, I get what you're saying about kind of the parting of the Red Sea, if you will, for Keselowski. But I think it has to be said he had race-winning pace on his own. To be clear, he certainly has had that pace for a while this year. And even in the last year, I think it was only a matter of time. We've been saying this on the show. If he keeps running like this, if he keeps showing this speed, and Chris Buescher, I think, driving the exact same equipment is proof of that. That it was only a matter of time before he got in the victory lane himself. So great to see him break that winless streak, and great for Ford as well. Although I have to say the booth was, it seemed like they were calling him home, with 3 or 4 laps to go, and Ty Gibbs was shaving off a couple of tenths a lap, closing that gap there. And he was obviously very hungry for his first win as well. Josh Berry in third place behind Ty Gibbs there as well. A very strong run for him. So really the entire top 3, I think, there would have been good stories either way, no matter who would come out on top. But for Brad in particular to end that winless streak, and for Ford, huge weight off their shoulders, no doubt.
Huge weight off their shoulders. And I think for Brad Keselowski, so long without a win, it's so easy, I think, for a driver to start thinking, will I ever win a race again? Will it ever come back? Will I ever get there? Especially after Talladega, I think a lot of folks were thinking, will he ever get that break? He got it. Now he can focus on trying to go for more wins. Very exciting for him, but unfortunately for his teammate Chris Buescher, his race looked like it was going to be something to rebound after last week coming up short, but that got ruined. Buescher said he was wrecked by Tyler Reddick on a move that wouldn't work. He charged and shoved Tyler Reddick. The two exchanged words, with Reddick saying he messed up. Ben Reddick said he didn't want to hit Buescher. Will this carry on between the two, or will they clear the air, the two drivers?
I think obviously it would give us a lot to talk about if, this did carry on here. But I think, both of them alluded to this. They've raced each other cleanly and with respect for many years. They're both NASCAR champions in their own right in the Xfinity Series and, have come into their own at this point in Cup even. So I think that they'll probably, unless we see something in the near future that escalates this, I think as long as this is just a one-time isolated incident, I have a feeling they'll, once the emotions die down after this evening, they might, one of them might call the other to clear the air, not in the heat of the moment. And hopefully that'll just be it. But at the same time, I'm sure there are some people that, would have to think that it might be a good marketing opportunity if this turns into a season-long sort of deal or rivalry here. But you get Chris Buescher's frustration, obviously, thinking that he had the race won last week and then, being in a good position to do it again this week and, just coming up short through the circumstances there with Reddick. But at the same time, I think that, like I said, these are two that, have raced each other with respect for years before this incident. As long as it doesn't get too out of hand in the following weeks, I think this is probably just a one-time deal and they put it behind them.
Yeah, I agree with Ben. This is just a one-time thing. And think of it from Chris Buescher's perspective. He just lost last week by the closest of margins in history. And then this week it looked like he was cruising to another win, or at least had a shot at it. And then Reddick essentially takes him out, you could say, or just got into him like that. But he has every right to be frustrated. And I'm glad Chris Buescher actually defended himself, because he's a very quiet guy. He doesn't really say a lot. For him to go up there and defend himself like this, that's a good thing. He really needed to do that and show everyone else in the field, like, hey, don't mess with me. I think that was a good thing for him to do. But I don't think this is going to lead anywhere. Chris Buescher just had a lot of frustration after last week and then again today. And Tyler Reddick and Chris Buescher, they're not two guys that are very confrontational, I don't think. So I bet Tyler Reddick is probably going to call him sometime this week, and they'll talk it out. And Chris Buescher will ultimately understand he's not going to be happy about it, but this isn't going to be like a long feud or anything.
Yeah, I get the sense the two will clear the air for Chris Buescher. Some good news. Jordan Bianchi tweeted out Brad Keselowski confirmed a multi-year contract extension with RFK. So good news for him and more opportunities to hopefully go out there, get that win. Because Buescher, like you said, Alex, I was glad he stood up for himself, even if he knows it wasn't 100% intentional. Don't be a pushover. Stand up. Say, hey, you ruined my race, and make it clear. Because after everything, it's just one of those deals. Tough 2 weeks for Chris Buescher.
Yeah, and Joe, just to add on to that real quick, credit to Tyler Reddick as well for owning it, because he didn't shove back or push back or say, What are you talking about? Or that he had no regrets. He owned up to it and said that was the last thing that he wanted to do, because ultimately it ruined his race as well. He could have been the one that was in victory lane. He led a bunch of laps today, and it took him out of contention as well. So I think that when you factor all of that into consideration, I have a hard time seeing this continue to get out of hand and escalate over the coming weeks.
And a comment in the chat room from John. I'm looking forward to Tuesday Indy 500 practice. We're going to have recaps of all the practice days. Be sure to subscribe to us right here on the Grid Network so you don't miss any of that. And we got word tech is complete. So official results. Pit stops. Gentlemen, this was something else between Brad Keselowski and Tyler Reddick. I had so much fun. The racing was good between them. Seeing the pit crews dueling each other essentially. This was just fun all race long up till, of course, the end where Buescher, Reddick, their races came undone. Kansas really showcased the aeros package, the strength of this generation car. Darlington, more the tire management. Wasn't extreme as Bristol, I'll say that. But we saw how hard it was to get around and not use up the tire because it was so abrasive, this track. Alex, Darlington is one of the few tracks with 2 dates. Are we satisfied with the racing product today?
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this race. Darlington is a track that if we're going to have tracks have 2 dates, Darlington needs to be one of them, and I'm glad it ended up getting that date back eventually. But and my other thing is with the crowd today was also really good, by the way. So I think it's definitely deserving of keeping 2 dates. But also with Throwback Weekend on one and the Southern 500 on the other, Darlington's dates are two very distinguished. And I know a lot of people are kind of tired on Throwback Weekend and everything, but and that some less teams are doing it. But the vibes were just so good. I had a lot of fun watching it. I had a lot of fun talking about all the paint schemes this past week. Good vibes. But yeah, Darlington, fantastic track. It's easy top three up there with Kansas and Homestead right now in terms of race quality. Just always so much fun. And just throughout this whole race, you just really saw how hard these guys had to drive. And you get that everywhere, but it's a whole different level, specifically at Darlington, with how unique and difficult to drive this place is. I love it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've been consistent on this show and on social media. I'm of the mindset that I would prefer if no track had 2 dates, because I think a perfect schedule would be 28 to 32 races at 28 to 32 different tracks. But we could add certain tracks that we'd like to be going to that we're not going to right now without having to completely lose other tracks on the schedule that we like. But if we have to have tracks that have 2 dates, I think Darlington, along with Kansas and Homestead, like you mentioned, Alex, those are certainly good contenders given how this car is racing right now. I know we were talking backstage before we came on. It's a shame that we're struggling a bit on the short tracks and road courses with this car because, the intermediates, I mean, you just can't miss every single weekend with these Cup cars. The Next Gen is putting on one heck of a show, and Darlington is certainly no exception there. So I think given the current state of where we are in the Cup Series, no issues with Darlington being one of the tracks that has 2 dates on the calendar.
Now, Ryan Blaney, he was one of the drivers, looked like he was going to have a good day, especially he made up a lot of ground on that first stage by staying out later, cutting the stage in half, leapfrogging a bunch of drivers that had pit earlier with tire management. But then his day came to a crashing end on a restart. William Byron made it 3 wide. Wasn't going to work exiting turn 2. Blaney was on the high side, Truex in the middle. They get squeezed up. Blaney hits the wall hard, exiting turn 2, and Truex got into his back end. Other cars were damaged, but they kept running. But Blaney, one of the big things, the damaged vehicle policy clock expired. He came back on the track. He got really close to William Byron to send a message he was not happy with him. In the interview he had after he got from the medical examination center, he was not happy at all, especially when he saw the replay. Ben, was this move uncalled for this early in the race, or was it fair game since Byron had a better restart compared to Truex and Blaney made the move on the inside?
It's tough to say. I didn't think that the move was necessarily super egregious on Byron's part, but at the same time, I can certainly understand where Blaney's coming from in terms of it being at that point in the race where, maybe that's not a move it's necessary to make with so many laps to still go. Even though we were just talking about Reddick and Buescher going at it again, if there had been fewer laps or if that had been an incident that happened, inside 10 to go or something like that, maybe Blaney would be a little bit more forgiving there. But obviously, it ruined his race, took him out of contention. I think he had every right to be frustrated by that. So, I can't really I don't think it's, super clear or obvious on either side here. I certainly understand Byron's going to defend himself for, seeing a gap and taking it there and trying to make a move. But at the same time, I don't expect Ryan Blaney to be super happy about it because it completely ruined his day.
Yeah, I agree with Ben. I think it's just a racing incident, something that specifically can happen at Darlington because this track can be so tight, especially on the backstretch. There's not a lot of room to go. Is it pretty early in the race for this to happen? Sure, but I don't necessarily blame William Byron for anything here. I mean, was it probably his fault? Yeah, but again, it's a racing incident, and these kinds of things happen, and Ryan Blaney has every right to be upset about it, especially that with how he hasn't been running in the way that you would probably expect him to. He just won the championship. He had a strong conclusion to last year, and then with Ford struggles, it seems, with everyone but RFK at the moment. It's just Blaney's pretty frustrated, and for that to happen, I get it.
And one of the things they mentioned, year has not exactly gone Blaney's way. It looked good, especially after Atlanta coming so close to the win. How different situation would it be if he got to that win didn't come through. Just overall, one of those frustrating deals. And this is Darlington. They were talking about with Terry Labonte, you don't go in there too wide, but we saw driver after driver go in there too wide, preferably single file, but three wide, that was pushing it. So overall, a lot of action there. John, I like NASCAR, but there needs to be more drivers entered, especially in the truck series. Highly encouraged. Monday, Grid Encore, Ben, Brandon, they'll be talking about the truck series and the Xfinity series tomorrow right here on YouTube. And Adam, last few weeks, NASCAR has been awesome to watch. Bring on the All-Star race. A lot of folks excited about the All-Star race and the new pavement. What's going to happen? One of the big things, Kyle Larson, looked like he was going to have a good day. Fast car, but tire went down, ruined his day. And he was looking like a contender to win. It could have been easily, especially knowing what we know now. If he had not had that tire go down, where would he be? Pit crew, they were still fast, but just not fast enough with Keselowski and Reddick's team. But now Kyle Larson, he is preparing for the Indianapolis 500 this week. Alex, how big is this for Kyle to now switch his focus and prepare to qualify for the Indianapolis 500?
See, for Kyle Larson, I think for him, this is just another week because he goes and races all kinds of different things throughout the week. And yeah, this is the Indianapolis 500. It is practice week for the Indy 500, and you're qualifying for the biggest race in the world this upcoming weekend. But for Kyle Larson, he's doing racing nearly every single day of the week as it is. So for him, I don't think he's going to be too fazed by it. I really don't. I'm very curious to see how he handles everything and how in his interviews, because people are going to be asking him, are you feeling overwhelmed? What are you thinking so far? I think he's just going to be playing it very cool. We'll see what he ends up saying. But it's going to be very, very fascinating. And I think it's a good thing for his own mentality and psyche here that it's the All-Star race, a NASCAR race that doesn't exactly matter too much. That, like if he needs to focus on qualifying for Indy 500, he can probably do that. It's just he doesn't put too much focus into the All-Star race. And even then, he's probably going to go to the All-Star race and be a contender for the win there. The guy's built different, and I am so, so excited to see him attempt to make the Indy 500.
Guys, I'm torn on this because I get it, from Mr. Hendrick's perspective. Obviously, Kyle Larson has a day job and has, a season that he has to be worried about in terms of a place where he's running full time. And a lot of people depended on him to do that job to the best of his ability. But at the same time, I mean, come on now, this is the Indianapolis 500. It's the I got to be careful with what I say here because I love North Wilkesboro. I love the fact that, we've opened that track back up for All-Star weekend and everything. But I don't know. I'm trying to picture a scenario in my head where, Kyle Larson's in the fast 6 or 9 or 12 or whatever. And, he has to skip that to go participate in this exhibition race. I don't know off the top of my head, what the schedule conflicts would look like should he make it that far in qualifying or whatever. But I've got to tell you, it's an interesting dynamic for sure. And I got to say, I wish especially given how the race has ended the last couple of years, I wish that it was starting about an hour earlier than it is. I think the green flag is scheduled for 12:45 or something right now. So if we get in a situation where they decide to red flag it again with less than 10 laps to go, I've got a feeling he's probably going to be getting a little anxious inside that car. So it's I think he's certainly Alex, to your point, obviously, he's used to crazy schedules like this. He goes and races, extracurricularly all the time. And I guess, in some ways for him that he would have a similar mindset here. But again, it's the Indianapolis 500 for crying out loud. So I think, it certainly requires him to be all in terms of his dedication. And I have no doubt that he's going to give it 110% and run it to the best of his ability. But, I can't help but wonder, what the optics are, if you're letting a race that technically doesn't even count for points. I know there's a lot of prize money and prestige on the line, but no points on the line. And you're letting that race over in NASCAR affect what happens at Indianapolis. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles it. We'll find out here in just a week or so.
Yeah. And that's been something that I've been finding very puzzling with this whole thing because he continues to say that his focus will be on NASCAR. I mean, that is his day job. That's his sole job here. But, it's the Indianapolis 500. Part of me wonders, do you know how big this is, Kyle Larson? I think he knows. but it's also you're going to go run an exhibition. It's just for fun. I just don't get it. When the Dale Jr. throwback for today was teased, I was one of the people who's like, oh, like I was half joking, but I was like, what if Dale Jr. is going to run at North Wilkesboro for Kyle Larson? That obviously didn't happen. Kevin Harvick's going to practice and qualify the 5 car and be on standby if something happens, but why are you running the All-Star race? I don't understand. I feel like NASCAR would give you a pass and be like, okay, we get it. Haha, it's fine. But I don't know. I think it's very silly. Your focus really should just be on this. And if you make the fast on that, but it sounds like if he makes it to the top 12 in Indy 500 qualifying, he ain't going to qualify that day. He's going to go straight to the All-Star race, which I find very goofy. I mean, you'd be passing up on some extra laps that a lot of other guys won't be getting. But again, we'll see what happens here. I think he's going to do that. He continues to say that NASCAR be his top priority when this is like, probably the biggest thing of his career that he's done, and he's done a lot of crazy things.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's a 500-mile race. I don't think his race is ruined if he's starting 12th versus, gaining a few more spots if he participates in that shootout or whatever. But, again, it does, you can be an outsider and look at that. And, if you don't know any better, you might, question whether or not he's, 110% committed to what he's trying to do here to go run a non-points race over on the Cup side. So, again, it's like I said, Kyle Larson is, I think, a generational talent, no matter what race car he gets in. He's going to be a contender, but, he's got to be careful with how he handles this situation, because this race, requires you to be all in to have a shot to win it.
All in. As long as he's not in the last row shootout, I think everybody would be. Oh, yeah. That would be something else. That would be a mess. And
I bet if he's in that, he skips the All-Star race.
Yeah, I would think. Or Harvick at least gets in the car to start the race, and then maybe we have a 2007 Milwaukee situation. I mean, can you imagine that? Kevin Harvick winning the All-Star race with Kyle Larson taking the checkered flag. That would be something. But yeah, I'd imagine he's not going to miss that. But I would hope that he doesn't have to worry about that to begin with. I think he's going to be fine.
Maybe in that scenario, our good friend and colleague Jackson Lambros is going to be so happy because Tony Kanaan will probably qualify in that car. But and that's the only way you see Tony Kanaan in an IndyCar again, driving.
I don't know. He teased something on Twitter this week, though.
He's just teasing. He's
I
having
know.
fun with it.
I'm just TK fans can dream, though, right?
Yeah.
We'll be following it all right here on the Grid Network. Since I brought up the last row, how many drivers are entered? We have 34 because one entry, Able Motorsports, dropped out this week. So no longer 34 entries in the Indy 500. And we'll be switching over to NASCAR. But a friendly reminder, a busy week for Kyle Larson practice. Starting with essentially this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to recap practices right here on the Grid Network. Then the All-Star race on Wilkesboro. Be interesting to see what happens with all that. Ben, let's switch over to talking about the IndyCar Series and their race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, we still have a couple weeks before the Indianapolis 500, but the month of May is still kicked off here. We had an IndyCar race on the IMS road course this weekend, and Alex Palou enters this upcoming week trying to accomplish something very special with his Indy Grand Prix win. He now has a chance to sweep the entire month of May with the Grand Prix, the Indianapolis 500 pole, and the Indianapolis 500-mile race, just as Simon Pagenaud did in 2019. Now, Palou has taken a significant step towards this ambitious goal, securing a victory in the Sonsio Grand Prix yesterday with a performance that left no room for doubt, likely would have dominated the race even more had he not lost the lead early to Christian Lundgaard, but Palou relied on his pit crew to get ahead of Lundgaard. Even a late caution didn't phase him. So we'll bring Kobe back in for this one. Good to see you, Kobe. Is
Hello.
Alex Palou now the favorite entering the Indianapolis 500, or do we have to wait and see how he performs in qualifying before we give him that title?
I don't think we have to wait at all until qualifying. I think Alex Palou is definitely one of the favorites. Look at his pole run from last year. I thought Alex Palou was going to win the Indianapolis 500, but I believe it was that little miscue on pit road. Put him back and had to fight through the field. He was still able, to get a decent result, salvage what was left of that day. But looking at Alex Palou, it's just been incredible to look at the run that he's been on. Before the show, I was looking through Alex Palou's stats, and I didn't even realize this for some reason until now, but he got a top 10 in every single race in his championship winning season, and that's an extremely rare stat. You don't see that nowadays in motorsports anywhere, because you expect there to be a bad day where you get in a crash or have a mechanical failure, but nothing like that has happened to Alex Palou. It's really crazy that the last time that he finished outside of the top 10 was at the Grand Prix of Portland in 2022, and to continue this top 10 streak has been very impressive. I think we need to go and look through the database and see like what's the longest streak for the amount of consecutive top 10s in IndyCar races, because if Alex Palou keep this up, he may very well be up there, because this is just so incredible. I don't really have much more words to add to this, but I think Alex Palou is definitely one of the favorites for the Indy 500.
There's no doubt in my mind that Alex Palou is the favorite for the Indy 500. He was last year, and I'd say he was the year before. He is just on another level right now, Alex Palou is. And sure, you can wait till qualifying, but I think all that's going to tell you is confirm this. I think Palou, I would honestly predict him to win the pole, or at least be on the front row for the Indy 500. He was going to win it last year. I really do think he was going to win it until that incident between he and Rinus VeeKay in the pits. That wasn't even Palou's fault. He was just an innocent bystander in that situation. And he still came back up to finish fourth. This guy's a beast. I really think that if you want to win the Indy 500, you're going to have to beat this guy. And if he has a flawless race at Indianapolis, good luck. Good luck to the other 32 drivers that'll be in that, because he's going to be the guy to beat. I really believe it. And just like he was this past weekend, he's the guy to beat nearly every week.
Yeah, I think he and Scott Dixon, his teammate, have to be considered two favorites, because we know Dixon is always up front in the front row shootout, and a contender for pole position. Hasn't been able to close the deal since 2008, though, so I'm sure he's just as hungry for a 500 win. So I think those two Ganassi teammates are probably going to be the two that you have to look at least going into the month of May. We'll see. I would assume Ganassi is going to have the speed that they always have, but I guess we'll get confirmation of that once we get through qualifying. But to Kobe's point, I don't think you have to wait to qualifying to put those two up front as some of your favorites there. We move on, we got a comment here from John Bender again. I hope Will Power or Larson wins the pole on Sunday at Indianapolis. Certainly the hype train is going to be going through the roof if it's the latter there. But again, with everything Penske's been through the last month or so, I think Power would be a good story for that team as well.
It'd be interesting to see it'll be interesting to see if Penske has the speed in qualifying. They haven't really had it in qualifying still, but in the race last year they showed up, specifically with the two. It'll be very interesting if they have the quality speed now. They just have not had that, because Power was in the last row shootout just a few years ago.
That's right.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add one last thing. Ben, I wanted to add a crazy stat I saw over the weekend about Scott Dixon. Motorsports photographer Chad Smith said that Scott Dixon's last pole outside of the Indianapolis 500 came in 2016 at Watkins Glen. Since then, Dixon has made the Firestone Fast Six a total of 43 times without winning the pole. So besides the Indy 500 poles, Dixon hasn't won a pole at a non-Indy 500 race since 2016. I think that's one of the wildest stats for one of the greatest race car drivers of all time.
Wow.
Yeah, that is remarkable. But then again, if you're going to only win a couple of poles in a 6 or 8 year span here, I think my goodness, 2016 is already 8 years ago. It's wild to me as well. But I think if there's any track to break that stretch and take pole position, it's certainly the Indianapolis Oval for the 500. So like I said, I'm sure Palou's going to be a threat, but he's going to have to go through his teammates to get that pole as well. Let's talk about Power a little bit, though. He finished second to Palou. He's now second in the point standings as well. Our friend Jackson Lambro certainly eating some crow for that one. But maybe our friend Alex here is as well, because Colton Herta is fourth, 25 points out of the lead. So he is very much within striking distance, actually tied for third in terms of being on level with points with Scott Dixon. Of course, Dixon has a tiebreaker with a win at the moment. Of course, it is still very early, though. Now, yesterday on pre-race, it was mentioned that Herta needed to run his race, not get in trouble or make a mistake due to starting in the back of the field and come away and salvage a top 10 finish. He did that and got the biggest move of the race award. He did have some early contact with Marcus Ericsson, which got him upset, but he was able to cool down, move forward, and still come away with a solid result. So, Alex, we have to start with you on this one. has Colton Herta proven that he is in fact a championship contender and not the weakest link at Andretti?
It's race 4. It's too early. But to be serious, though, this is a really strong performance from Colton Herta this past weekend. I was very impressed with it. I watched the race, and I thought when he was going to be way back in like the 20s, like, oh, well, it's over. He's going to overdrive, and he's going to crash and finish in like 25th or whatever. He didn't do that. He actually came back up and got his top 10. That Colton Herta of like even last year, I don't think could have done that. It was honestly a very impressive drive, and kudos to him for doing that. And it was on his team, the fact that he had to drive through the field because they didn't put enough fuel in his car for qualifying, which that's a silly move on Andretti Autosport, or Andretti Global's part, excuse me. But yeah, Colton Herta, well, I want to see how he can do in the later part of the season, because this Indy race was probably one of the better races of his career that he did not win, honestly. But I'm not ready to say that. Yeah, Kyle Kirkwood's not having as strong of a start as I thought he would. Marcus Ericsson's having a very bizarre season. Matter of fact, he is who pushed Colton off the track early in this race. But Colton right now, he's leading Andretti, but I'm not ready to take back what I said in our preseason show. No.
Yeah, and I'll say I think it's too early for me to say if Colton Herta is going to be a true championship contender, but I will say I believe we've seen a matured race car driver in Colton Herta, and in the situations we've seen him hit in earlier this year, he wouldn't have been able to finish where he finished. So I think that's a great. We usually see, him do a little too much, get himself in trouble, and then the finish is exactly where it shouldn't be. So I believe that Colton Herta is starting to mature and get much better as a race car driver, but I wouldn't go as far to say that he's like one of the main championship contenders so far in 2024. But I think give it a few more races, we'll see how he does, and then maybe he'll emerge as one of those championship favorites. But certainly he's looking like the strongest driver at Andretti right now over his teammates Kyle Kirkwood and Marcus Ericsson. And yeah, Herta was not happy at all with Marcus Ericsson. He believed Ericsson should have raced him with a lot more respect, being a teammate who was leading the championship. And I guess it seems like whoever's in that 28 car, whether it's Ericsson or Grosjean, always ruffling feathers there. And Andretti, and also the point in qualifying you brought up, Alex, I really don't understand how you let the car run out of fuel in qualifying. I guess that'll be the latest excuse Liberty Media used for Formula, will use against Andretti Global for F1. Be like, that's why you can't go to F1 because you let your cars run out of fuel for qualifying. But I guess that's a story for another day.
So, Ben, I'll tell you this. If Colton Herta can go a full season, 17 races in a row, excluding thermals, that's not a race, 17 races in a row, without crashing himself, I'll take back what I said. I'll say he's not the weakest link. If he can go a full season without crashing himself for no reason.
What if he has one crash for no reason, but also wins 6 races in the same season on his way to a championship? But he had that one race where he crashed on his own, but he recovered from it to win a title.
I'll believe that. That sounds like a miracle. I'll believe that when I see it. Okay. I don't think that's happening, but if that happens, yeah, sure.
It's still not as bad as what Jackson said, and that's proven by the standings right now, because there's only a few drivers ahead of Herta in the standings, and Will Power is one of them. So
Power is a true championship contender, but it's gonna be hard to beat Alex Palou.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And to Kobe's point as well, maybe that will be something that Liberty use against Andretti, even though there's also a team that only just now has a spare chassis here. What are we, 5 or 6 rounds into the season here? So, but again, probably something for a future roundtable or grid tonight. So we'll leave it there. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the drivers that ruffled some feathers, like you guys were saying. Ericsson, Herta making contact early. Certainly, Marcus Ericsson was one of them. But we also saw Santino Ferrucci and Romain Grosjean, the former driver of that 28, continue their feud on lap 1. Grosjean was run off track into the grass. The first corner was pure chaos all throughout the field. Scott McLaughlin and others made contact in the midfield on back. Now, NBC's James Hinchcliffe and Townsend Bell did discuss if penalties needed to be handed down or not. So Kobe will pose that question to you now. Does IndyCar need to rein in the opening laps and the contact made by the drivers?
Well, it was kind of strange, seeing Santino Ferrucci behave the way that he did with Romain Grosjean. Yeah, this was an incident, that started back in Barber with them getting into each other. And then I didn't think no more of that. And then we saw them get into each other once again. And then during the race, Grosjean passed Ferrucci clean, and then Ferrucci just literally just drove him off into the grass, and then Roman Grosjean was obviously very upset. So I don't really know where this feud goes from now. I know they're stirring the IndyCar hate cauldron right now, but hashtag Indy rivals. So I guess if IndyCar needs a rivalry right now, Roman Grosjean versus Santino Ferrucci is where you go. But I guess if hopefully this doesn't happen during the rest of the month of May, especially on the 2.5 mile Indianapolis Motor Speedway. If Grosjean and Ferrucci are racing each other on the oval, hopefully Ferrucci will understand that will be a dangerous situation. Doesn't try to do anything really silly around Grosjean. Hopefully they'll race with respect on the high speed oval. I think that they will, but if we get to future rounds, where Ferrucci is driving into Grosjean again, I think then at that point, that's when IndyCar race officials need to step in and talk to both of them so this doesn't escalate any further. Because if they were in stock cars, it would obviously be different, but in these open wheel Indy cars that can go up to over 230 miles per hour in qualifying at the Indy 500, this could be a very dangerous situation, especially if tempers aren't kept under control.
Staying on specifically Santino Ferrucci, I'm shocked he didn't get a penalty because he literally just shoved Grosjean off the track, and that was not a penalty. Bizarre, but okay. If anything, I don't want them necessarily to start officiating more penalties for like contact and everything, but there needs to be more of a line drawn, I think, because I think Santino crossed the line there with that specifically. I don't know. I feel like the opening laps, they don't need to necessarily rein it in, but there are some issues like the Santino thing that just happened. And then sometimes they're like not lined up right, and then they wave off the restart, and it just kind of delays the start a bit. It looks a little goofy. There's some things that they could tweak, but I don't think there's nothing like major by any means.
Let's talk about Josef Newgarden now. Once again, finished outside the top 10, down in 17th place. You can't help but notice the Indy 500 ads beginning to pop up showing Newgarden triumphing in that race just 1 year ago. That was a popular win by the American driver and a dramatic finish, but it seems that some of the momentum is missing right now on that team, Team Penske. Some fans have heckled him and Penske after the whole push to pass controversy, and now it's led to two disappointing races as he enters the Indianapolis 500 as the defending champion. So, Alex, going to you first, is Newgarden missing out on some of that confidence and momentum the defending Indy 500 champion would typically have entering next year's edition of the race?
Yeah, absolutely. He is not the same Josef Newgarden that he was at St. Pete. That was a brand new Josef Newgarden that I hadn't seen in a couple years. He honestly just seems out of it, and he's kind of driving the same way he did late last year, where he just didn't seem mentally focused. He seems just not all there right now. And we saw at the beginning of the season, he cut out social media. He ended Bus Bros. He just changed his whole mentality and mindset going into this season to be more prepared. We saw that at St. Pete. Like, that was a different Josef. We haven't seen that in a while. That's on like a road or street course. But now we're back to running like in the teens again with Josef Newgarden. It's very uncharacteristic, but it's the same Josef that finished 5th in the points last year, which for Josef is pretty bad. He's 17th in points right now. That, of course, includes the penalties and everything. That's not good. And now he's without Tim Cindric and a couple other people on the team. The vibes aren't great for the two team. And Will Power, he's missing Ron Suzuki as well. And they ran fine, finished 2nd. Josef Newgarden without Tim Cindric and maybe others does not run well. It's not good. It does not look good for Josef Newgarden. I wouldn't pick him to win the Indy 500. That would be awesome for someone to go back-to-back, first time since Elio Castroneves, but I struggle to see that happening. I just don't think he's in the best headspace at the moment. Maybe he'll prove everyone wrong and he'll go back-to-back again and make history. I just don't see it. The vibes are not good right now over there.
Yeah, it really seems like the penalty at St. Pete really took the win out of his sails. Josef Newgarden, he came out at the very beginning of the season in St. Pete, dominated, and he really looked like he had that killer instinct inside of him, that this is going to be my season. He even had us saying like maybe he has a Max Verstappen type of season, and not necessarily in the form of going out to win all the races, all of that, but just to have one of those career years where he's winning a lot of races, dominating a lot of these races, and just improving on what we've already seen from his incredible racing career. But I don't understand like what's happened the last 2 rounds with Josef Newgarden. Like you said, Alex, he just doesn't seem like the same guy at all, and he was completely out of it at the IMS road course. I believe just like he did in Barber, he even had a spin and believe it was in practice or something like that. And that's something you don't see from Josef Newgarden, have spins in practice in 2 consecutive races, and then he wasn't even a contender at all on Saturday, not even once. He's usually if he's not contending, he's usually up there in the top 5, top 10, making some noise some way somehow. But Josef Newgarden was like one name, that if you're watching it, you wouldn't even mention, because he was basically just there. And going into the month of May in this type of form, I don't think that's good for him and Team Penske. It really seems like that this whole situation and what happened with the push to pass controversy is, really bothering him. And it's going to be interesting to see if Josef can, break out of this little funk that he's in post scandal, and see if he can try to reclaim the form that he showed in St. Pete. But it really seems like that this has really had a major effect on him mentally.
Well, I'll tell you who's making me eat my words is Scott McLaughlin, because McLaughlin really got hit in the points after his disqualification as well. And I said, Newgarden's still high enough that I think he could rebound easily. With McLaughlin, it might be more of the mental aspect of coming back from dead last in the standings. Now, I think he's all the way up to 6th. I know we took the standings down from our display screen here, but I think he's around there. Newgarden obviously has just dropped back. So it's been interesting how those two have been able to handle the mental aspect of going through a difficult situation following St. Pete. And, I'm with you guys. I think, there's certainly time for him to bounce back if he goes out and shows some speed in practice and in qualifying. That I would hope would bring some of that confidence and momentum back to him. But at the moment, I don't know that you can consider him a favorite to go back-to-back and win the 500 again. Now, let's move on here and let's talk about Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing. Pit stops were their weakness in yesterday's race. Lundgaard lost position to below. Will Power and Graham Rahal started 9th and finished 9th as well. Last year, of course, in the Indy 500, RLL was absolutely terrible. They were almost all involved in the last row shootout. Catherine Legg was the only one that got out of that, and even then was only in 30th place. And, of course, Graham was the one who failed to qualify entirely. Of course, he did get back in the race after he replaced the injured Stephen Wilson, but he got bumped by his teammate Jack Harvey in that epic, dramatic bump day shootout. So, Kobe, does this race and missed opportunity for a better finish make entering the Indy 500 more stressful for the Rahal Letterman team?
Master may surprise you, Ben, but despite the heartbreak for Kristen Lundgaard, having a shot to win there, I think RLL has to hold their head high based on this result in the Sonsio Grand Prix. Yeah, Kristen Lundgaard has been really good at this one specific track. I remember, a couple of years ago, he made his IndyCar debut at this track and really shocked everybody for qualifying as well as he did and for running as well as he did. I believe at some point in the future, Kristen Lundgaard is going to win at the IMS road course because he's so overdue. He's so good at this racetrack. Unfortunately, with the way the strategy worked out, it just didn't fall for him this time, but maybe in the future it will. But I think Kristen Lundgaard's team has to feel really happy with the day they had. Graham Rahal as well, getting a solid finish, and for that number 30 Honda Pietro Fittipaldi, which has really struggled this season. I know probably still not the finish that Pietro wanted, but it was a lot better considering what we've seen from him at the start of this season. So I think overall, considering how RLL is usually running, I really think they have to be happy, with the result that they have, especially that number 30, to get an improved result. So I don't think it's necessarily going to make the month of May more stressful. I think if they get on track this week and they're showing the exact same speed that they showed last year, then they, will start to panic and feel more stress.
Well, with RLL, they've had 2 really strong runs at the Indy road course now, Graham Rahal and now Christian Lundgaard. They're not wins, but they're really strong performances. I know it's not the same exact track, but having strong performances at that venue, it has to give some positive mojo and everything. But we're going into the 500 now, and yeah, Kobe's right. If they go into practice and they are like bottom 3 on the pylon, just like they were year ago, I'd be very worried. But it seems to me that they have more speed than they did a year ago. They were not good on the road courses at this point either. Now they are. So I am very curious to see how that goes for them. And if they are involved in bump day again, that's going to be super frustrating. It's like they have a whole year to make upgrades and progress, and they're just right where they were. That would absolutely be disappointing for them. But I don't expect them to be there. I'm honestly thinking you're going to see more of the coin cars down there again. I don't think you're going to see RLL in the shootout, but I would have said that last year too. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
All right, we'll leave it there. And of course, we will have coverage for you this week of every practice session for the Indianapolis 500 on the Grid Network. I know somebody in the chat earlier in the show was asking about weather. Not looking too great for Tuesday right now, at least according to my weather app for Speedway Indiana, but we'll keep an eye on that. Sometimes this time of year, the weather can look not so great and then turns out to be fine. Other times it can look like we've got a window to get things in. And of course, we get a pop-up shower. So it's very hard to predict, but keep your fingers crossed so we get as much track time in as possible. And don't miss out. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell icon here on this channel if you haven't already, to make sure you get notified for all our programs throughout the week. In the meantime, Alex, before we let you go tonight, we'll give you a chance to give your one shining moment. So what's it going to be?
I got to give it to Hendrick Motorsports for that throwback to Terry Labonte's Kellogg's car. That looked awesome. That's probably one of the best throwbacks that's ever been done since they started doing Throwback Weekend, in my opinion. And having Terry Labonte at the track, just so cool. I really loved it. And then Fox had Terry in the booth for a bit. And you might have forgot a couple of times. He's a pretty quiet guy, but I had a lot of fun watching that. Just fantastic. They had the fire suits matching. They had Terry in a fire suit, which I found very cute. So yeah, I'm going to give it to the Hendrick 5 throwback scheme. Fantastic. And also for the 5 to get sideways the same way Terry Labonte did after getting spun by Dale Earnhardt at Bristol. That was funny. It just kind of wrapped it all together in a nice little bow. That's my shiny moment, 100%.
Reminded me of the booth, Alex. I love that Mike Joy had the Speed Channel logo on his shirt as well. So, nice to see that from Fox this weekend. I know we're hard on them sometimes for their coverage, but I think they did a nice job incorporating some of the throwback aspects into their coverage today, especially bringing Terry into the booth. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll let you go, and we'll see you back here soon.
Right. See you guys. Have a great show.
Thank you. All right. We have a very special treat here as we open up our Formula E coverage. I believe, Ed, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's almost 2 a.m. over where you are, but you are an absolute trooper for coming on here and joining us for this segment. So welcome, Ed Hunter, to the show from Formula E Zone as we talk about the Berlin E-Prix.
I just hope my family agrees with you, Ben, at the end of this segment. But anyway, yeah, great to be here. Let's talk Berlin.
All right. And glad to see you again, Ed. Been a while since I've seen you. So with that said, the ABB Formula E World Championship is down to 3-race weekend, 6 races, and all the drivers, including those 0 points, are still mathematically eligible. Antonio Felix da Costa jumped to 8th place with today's win and he's 81 points behind. His first win of the season was disqualified. A lousy start to the season, but he ended up getting the win today. I assume he gets to keep it this time. 29 points max per weekend, 174 points left to claim. At 81 points behind the leader, can Antonio Felix da Costa put together a second half rally? Starting with you, Joe.
It's going to have to be something phenomenal, something we haven't seen in a long time since his championship season back in 2020. So he would really have to step it up if he was to do such a rally, and also need bad luck from the drivers ahead of him, because 81 points, yeah, there's 174 points left to claim. The math shows it's there, but you have drivers like Nick Cassidy, Pascal Wehrlein. They always find themselves towards the front. They don't have a whole lot of bad days. They do occasionally. This is Formula E after all. So you need them to have some bad luck. You need to have a great effort each and every week. Go on a winning streak like we haven't seen before really in Formula E. The Porsche team, they're capable of doing that. Their powertrain is pretty good. I just think time is short on them. Curious to hear what Ed thinks of Tony Felix Acosta. A second half rally, I think that'll be huge if he could pull it off.
It would be, but I think it's also wildly unrealistic and I think also it would require him to be given the points back from Misano, the race that he won and got disqualified from which I think would also require the FIA to destroy the rule book, which I don't see happening, quite honestly. But yeah, I certainly think it's really between the top 5, in my opinion, which is Cassidy leading, obviously, then Pascal Wehrlein, Oliver Rowland, Jake Dennis, and Mitch Evans. I really don't see Da Costa mounting a comeback past, as you can see. Oh, here it is on my right. I really don't see him getting past into that top 5 territory. I think he's really going to be fighting out with Gunther Verne and maybe Evans, if Evans has a few more up and down sort of races. But lately he's been getting it together as well. Like Monaco, he won, of course, and was 4 just outside the podium places today. I think fell to 6th, I think, by the end of the race, if I remember correctly. So, and yeah, I think Cassidy was charging for the win on Da Costa and made his charge a little bit too late, but he obviously takes championship lead from Wehrlein, which is crucial for him. So yeah, I think there's plenty more to play for, but Da Costa is going to need a few more, like Joe says, lots of horrendous luck for the people he's fighting with in order to get into the championship fight. And given the way his luck's been, I don't quite see that happening for him.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think it's game over for Antonio Felix da Costa championship wise, but he can certainly salvage, some good points finishes and compete for race wins and podiums for the rest of the season, maybe for his Formula E future as well, considering what we've heard in the media about his future, especially that interesting report by Sam Smith from the race. And if da Costa has a tall ladder to climb, these are some notables that are even further behind. Stoffel Van Dorn is in 9th, Sam Bird 10th. Both division drivers are 14 and 15th. Eduardo Mortara's 20th and 25th with 0 points. Nick DeVries, they're mathematically alive for the points championship, but is it really game over? And do you expect any of them to have any shot at it, or just simply to make some noise?
I think making noise is all they can do. And Sam Bird, who's out of the hand injury for the next couple of months, which is probably going to be until the end of the season or beginning of next season, we're not going to see Sam Bird in the car until, I think, testing, because of the surgery that he's had to do for his hand, which is probably something we can talk about in another show when it's not so late as well. The lack of power steering in these cars and the drivers taking their hands off the wheel to avoid getting injured. So yeah, Sam Bird in 10th is definitely not going to challenge. Van Dorn is not consistent enough to challenge, and you've got the Envision drivers who've lost too much ground from missing this doubleheader weekend. Mortara, who's got not really the car to challenge, in 20th, although he did get pole position yesterday, which was very impressive, and he was 7th today as well on the grid. And then Nick DeVries in 25th with no points yet. It's difficult to see anything happening for Nick DeVries. He might be able to get a few more points once he's back in the car, because Mahindra are slowly making progress. But yeah, I think the answer, do any of these guys have a chance? One word: no, they do not. They've got less than a chance, to be honest, because you really need a better start to the season than this if you wanted to be in that top 5 fight. I really think it's those top 5 that we're going to be talking about next couple of weekends.
I would have to agree. I think they could contend for a win here and there, especially Portland. Shanghai looks possible. Great opportunity to try to get a win. And your season on a little bit of a high note, climb up the standings in the drivers and the team standing. But for a championship, I think it's out of reach. Eduardo Mortara, I feel especially that team, a lot of folks were anticipating maybe it'll be a bit of a turnaround season with him and Nick DeVries. Has not been going that way. And now Nick DeVries, 25th in the points, 0 points. It's just that team is slowly working their way, but it's too slow. Big thing to do, I think, is just go out there, try to get a win here and there, so that way you got some positive momentum, something to look forward to. But a championship, yeah, I just think it's out of reach.
Yeah, for sure. And Joe, yesterday on the pre-race show, you and Anisha said it felt like the intensity and contact was more like NASCAR. This race had big moves, plenty of contact, and drivers upset at each other, as you both predicted. A late safety car brought in overtime and more energy management peloton racing. The next race is the Shanghai circuit with a modified layout, but like Portland, a wide purpose-built road course. The initial track map shows turns 1 through 9 on the same Formula One course, but shortcuts to the front stretch with a chicane making turns 10 and 11, then a right-hander onto the front stretch. Joe, after so many peloton-style races, do you see a common theme that could influence the strategy plan?
if I was that good at strategy planning for a Formula E team, I'd probably be working there. But from my observation, from what I'm seeing, you don't want to be tail end too far down the pack, especially if we get towards the halfway point of the race. Because at some point, past halfway, that's where you start to see the drivers start in the top 5, top 6 positions. You're going to get more aggressive in defending those positions. You're going to have a harder time getting up there towards the front. So this puts a big premium on qualifying or just having some phenomenal moves in the first couple of laps to work your way towards the front. So it's like what Nick Cassidy seems to have that great strength in. Once you're in the front, energy management, just knowing when to make the move, when to let somebody by, making the most of it. When the drivers were getting essentially on attack mode, they were doing that quickly and finding a spot where they could get it. And guess what? They might end up with the lead again just because they timed it right, knowing that the other drivers were going to get it. So really, I think when it comes down to it, when you're going to Shanghai, especially that long right-hand corner, then left-hand corner after this front stretch, that's really a good opportunity to try to position yourself up towards the front half of the field, manage your power, staying up there with that lead group, because as we get closer to that halfway point and things get more physical, it'll be harder for you to fall towards the back. Because once we get towards the end of the race, and especially even after a safety car, as we saw, the field then gets pretty strung out, and then you're really just trying to scrap for the top 10 point positions. So those are some of the common themes I'm seeing, essentially from what we saw today, Portland, and some of the other tracks where we had a lot more of the Peloton-style races.
Yeah, I think you raised some good points, Joe. It's certainly going to be another Peloton-style race at the Shanghai International Circuit, even with the bridge layout that they have. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, because one of the things that came out of Berlin, and obviously we had the new layout, but I think they were all saying this was going to happen in Berlin no matter what, because of some of the straights that they have there, essentially. That isn't the sort of traditional street circuit that you might normally expect, especially with the surface they have in Berlin. And one of the things that came out in interviews was Jordan King, who filled in for Nick de Vries today. He was basically, well, yesterday, technically my time, he was saying something along the lines of, I just remember, I'm trying to remember. I think he was saying that they basically saved energy at the start of the race, hung back, and then changed strategy. By the time they changed strategy, it was too late to sort of gain positions because they were too far back. And I remember Dan ticked him to something quite similar on the Saturday race. He basically said they overestimated how effective the Peloton effect would be, to the point where he had a really good first lap and then dropped back to save energy, and then he just couldn't use enough of it by the end because of the safety cars, essentially. And so yeah, it is kind of interesting, because it isn't just always a case of, we saw Cassidy do it very effectively on Saturday, where he fell down to 21st and then gradually fought his way back up. But that's not always going to be the case in a Peloton-style race, like Joe says. I think track position at some circuits matters a bit more than other, and some situations too is going to matter a bit more than others. But certainly having a very, very efficient car as well as a quick car is always been important in Formula E. So we are probably going to see a lot more people that don't want to lead the race and sort of swapping until we get to the final 10, 12 laps or so, when somebody's going to decide to sort of just go for it, and that'll sort of dictate the pace of what happens after. But we did see a lot of accidents in Berlin as well. In particular, we saw at one point, I think Fenestraz I think Verne made a mistake and sent Fenestraz flying at one point, and then Fenestraz got crashed into by Norman Nato. So not a good day for Sasha Fenestraz. But and that's a good example of the sort of things that can happen in a Peloton-style race. So hopefully with a bit more space than Berlin, Shanghai sees a few less accidents, or at least a few less serious consequences for contact, maybe. Oops. Just knocked the camera over.
It's all good. And the Shanghai E-Prix is Memorial Day weekend, another doubleheader. This Formula E season is going to have an interesting conclusion to it. So, Ed, thank you so much for staying up late to join us. So before we let you go, I want to ask you, what's your one shining moment from this racing weekend?
Well, to pick something from Formula E, I've not really thought about this in advance, even though I've had plenty of time to. So, but I think there are a couple of ones. I think Oliver Rowland had a very, very good weekend, finishing on the podium in some races with some amazing overtakes, diving up the inside from quite a way back, taking advantage of all the Peloton style race. And he said he wasn't quite sure how he was able to finish on the podium in both races. I thought Taylor Barnard, filling in for Sam Bird at McLaren while he's injured, got points in both races as well. And I thought that was a very, very impressive drive. And I think Jehan Daruvula also getting his best finish of the season, taking 7th off of Taylor Barnard at the very final lap. That was a very good drive because Daruvula has obviously not had the easiest time sort of things this season. So I would say those are the 3 things that immediately stand out to me as shining moments from this Berlin weekend. But I think if I was to go for one, it would be Mortara getting that pole position, because obviously Mahindra has had such a fallow season in terms of scoring points that they got the pole and they got 9th in race 1, I think, on Saturday. So I think for Frederick Bertrand, for that Mahindra team that's really been hammered, they got so close to scoring in Tokyo as well and they got disqualified. So to see him get pole position, I think was a stellar achievement for that squad, especially since it's a year on from the App squad with the same Mahindra powertrain getting poled in the way as well last year, Robin Fryans and Nico Müller looking out the front row. So it was great to see Mahindra really repeat that success, because you're on a completely different layout. You don't often see that in Formula E. So full marks to Ido Mortara, who really outdrove that car.
Thank you for sharing your shining moments from this weekend. A lot of great stuff there. Looking forward to working with you again in the future. And now we're going to bring Ben back on to talk about the IMSA race at Laguna Seca.
Night, guys. I'm going to bed.
Can't blame you there, Ed. Thank you so much for staying up with us. And Kobe, let's get into the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. The race for the overall win at Laguna Seca was decided with almost 10 minutes to go. It was a battle between the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac and the number 6 Porsche Penske Motorsport prototype. Now, Jack Aitken was leading in the number 31 Cadillac and took the wrong line while trying to get by GT traffic and ran himself off course. This gave a lead to Nick Tandy's number 6 Porsche, who ended up winning the race for Porsche Team Penske and co-driver Matthew Jaminet. So, Kobe, after Cadillac had dominated the race with both Action Express and Ganassi out front, do you view this as Cadillac letting a win slip away or Porsche taking advantage of this one slip-up?
To be honest, Ben, I think it's a little bit of both. But if you're Cadillac, you have to be absolutely sick, because that 01 and the 31, they were the class of the field this entire race, essentially, until the final 15 minutes of this race. I'm sure Jack Aitken is probably going to be replaying that moment again many times in his head for the next several hours or days or so, because because I have a feeling if he had taken the inside of those GT cars instead of try to go around them on the outside, he probably would have ended up winning the race. But I guess we can't really say for sure, because the Porsche was very close on Aitken right there with Nick Tandy. So I guess it's difficult to say whether or not Tandy would have gotten past him or not without that incident, but it was certainly a really bad mistake that Aitken had made, thinking he had room right there on the outside, but the GTs took the outside and there was Aitken off in the grass, off course, and that ultimately was the difference and led in the Porsche Penske camp win the race. So I think Porsche certainly has to be happy about this. They even brought up on the IMSA broadcast, the scandal going on in INDYCAR right now with Team Penske and how it's affected the sports car team. But obviously the sports car drivers didn't really talk too much about that. As you're saying, that was just a much needed win for the organization. So when these situations arise, you have to take advantage of them. I thought Tandy did a great job there at the end, fighting hard with Aitken and basically letting Aitken make a mistake on his own, and then he just capitalized on it.
Well, Action Express, Cadillac, and Jack Aitken weren't the only ones to experience an off in the final minutes that ended up deciding the outcome of the race. Only a few minutes after the Aitken off, Robbie Foley's number 557 Turner Motorsport BMW was leading the GTD class until the number 40 Acura of Jordan Taylor knocked Foley off the track, and that handed the GTD class victory to the number 57 Winwood Racing Mercedes of Philip Ellis and Russell Ward. Now, Turner Motorsport renumbered the number 96 to the number 557 in honor of the longtime BMW team's 557th race. It's been 2 years since their last win in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. Kobe, how much does it sting for Turner Motorsport to come so close to snapping their winless streak only to have the win taken away due to another competitor's mistake?
Oh man, this has to sting very badly for Turner Motorsport. Turner Motorsport has been one of the premier teams in IMSA GT racing for many years, and I was looking at the stats before the show, and it actually surprised me when I look at last season as a whole that Turner Motorsport went winless in 2023, and the last time they won, like you said, 2 years ago, it happened 2 years ago on this exact weekend at Mid Ohio. So it would have been very special for Turner Motorsport in race number 557 to go out there and get that win. It looked like they were going to get that win, but unfortunately, Jordan Taylor made contact with them, and that was that. So yeah, it's very unfortunate that something like that happened. But with the way Turner's been running to start this season, it would not surprise me if they end up breaking that winless streak at a different race later on in the season. But it definitely doesn't take away because it was a big celebration weekend for them reaching start 557, and and in the closing minutes, you thought that they were going to be able to do this. I'm sure everybody on that Turner Motorsport pit boss thought they were about to bring it home, and then to have that happen, it just shows that it's not over until it's over in these endurance races. Well, sprint race at Laguna Seca, but you get what I'm saying. It was just an unfortunate situation that happened there.
And finally, in the GTD Pro Class number 77 AO Racing, aka Rexy Porsche, took class honors with Lauren Heydrich and Seb Prio. Now, IMSA will return to action on June 1st with the GTP and GTD Pro classes when they race on the streets of Detroit. Now, let's bring Joe back in to talk about the MotoGP race from Le Mans.
Yeah, the MotoGP French Grand Prix weekend saw Jorge Martin sweep the weekend with pole, sprint, and Grand Prix wins. But the biggest story might be a double podium for Marc Marquez after finishing second in the Grand Prix. Marc Marquez is currently third in the point stand, and he says that he is back. Joe, does this weekend validate that Marc Marquez is ready to fight for the championship?
It really does. And he had that smile. He had that confidence. This is the Marc Marquez we haven't seen since he last won a championship in MotoGP. And it's a very exciting time for MotoGP. The racing overall was good. Yeah, it looks like Ducati is starting to get that advantage again. But just as part of the deal, at the end of the day, Jorge Martin swept the weekend, the pole. He's looking great. But you have Pecco Bagnaia, who's got the podium today in the race. And then, of course, Marc Marquez as well there. If these three riders are going to be fighting it out for the championship, this is going to be a lot of fun. I think Marc Marquez has to feel really good because he is. Marc Marquez, he has more championships than both of them. The experience, I think, could help him out. This has to be really exciting for him overall. And then the riders, I think this is just going to be something where it's going to be a lot of fun to see what happens between them. You're going to have riders like Pedro Acosta, who had an unfortunate rookie weekend. You have Aprilia. They're getting there occasionally. Maverick Vinales looking better than before. Brad Binder, he's either hit or miss each race weekend. Just a matter of which Brad Binder is going to show up to the track. This is shaping up to be a pretty exciting season. And Marc Marquez, seeing him smiling, second place. And I remember last year saying how when he was making comments like, I'd rather crash out fighting for 12th place rather than going for a better finish. I was like, no, you got to go finish these races. He's doing that now. He's getting the podiums, and now he's third in the championship standards. Game on from Marc Marquez.
Yeah, and I also think it's really great for the sport as well to see Marc Marquez riding well. He's certainly, one of the top MotoGP races of all time. They're one of the best that we've ever seen. And watching him these last few years, especially if you watched all of his dominant years, it's really hard to watch what I call a falling star. And for last few years, with all the injuries and, on that Honda bike that wasn't really that good, it was really hard to watch Marc Marquez, go through all the struggles and injuries that he went through. And we wonder if he could ever become the Marc Marquez of old. But based on what we've seen from him at the start of the 2024 season, he's starting to look like that Marc Marquez old, and he's looked like he's having fun again on these bikes. And I think that could be recipe for success. I don't know if Marc Marquez is going to ultimately fight for the championship this year, but I certainly think that he's going to be long overdue for that win. And it would not surprise me if it comes in the next several races. I think we could see Marc Marquez get a race win at some point later on in the season. And you already talked about him. One rider who probably had a little bit of a reality check this weekend was Pedro Acosta after getting a DNF while racing Alicia Spargo. The bike slid out from him and got into the gravel trap. This happened early in the race. Was this a rookie mistake and a good learning opportunity for him? This is, like the first time we've seen the sensational rookie, have a slip up.
Yeah, he was very confident, overconfident that he was going to go out there, make this pass, but it slipped out from underneath. And really, he was lucky. He could have easily taken out Alexius as well, had another rider involved. No involvement from anybody else, but he was done for. And I think this is just a good opportunity of controlling your pace in MotoGP in the races, because at the end of the day, you got to finish the races. We talked about this in the past with Marc Marquez not finishing the races. You don't finish the races, you're not scoring the points. He's been great all year long. This is just a mistake where racing hard early on, he could have waited another lap or two. If he hadn't made this move 3 laps later, easily it would have sticked. No issue at all. But a full tank, the weight was just working against him. And really, considering this is his first time making a mistake as a rookie, it's sort of good to get it out of your way. Now you know, okay, everyone expects you as a rookie to make mistakes, struggle, get DNFs. You got that first DNF out of your way now. Just focus on what you've been doing the past race weekends, going out there, running each race, learning the tracks, learning the bike, maximizing your effort. He got a long ways to go still. So I wouldn't see this as a big setback for him, just a learning opportunity to manage the race better and go out there, score more points the next few race weekends. And for the rest of the year, he is just phenomenal still in that gas bike.
Yeah, for sure. And the next race is in Barcelona for the Grand Prix of Catalonia, a big race weekend for all the Spanish riders on May 26th, and a big weekend of racing on Memorial Day this year. It usually seems like it's the 3 big ones, but for some reason they decided to add more this Memorial Day weekend, which is going to make our job at Grid Network a little harder, but hey, who doesn't want more racing, right?
Yeah, more race on Memorial Day. We'll be talking about that. Let's switch over to a World Rally Championship update. Rally de Portugal. Colin Raffampera, he looked like he was going to be going out there Saturday, sweep the weekend. Nope. He rolled the car over. He was done for. This handed the lead to his other teammate that's running part-time, Sebastian Ogier. Ogier had everything going his way. Autonic had nothing going to try to claim the win. So Sebastian Ogier takes another win. Thierry Neuville finished third, and Neuville leads Evans by 24 points and Tonic by 31. Tonic got around Adrian Formey in the standings. Rally Italia Sardinia is May 30th through June 2nd, and Ogier is scheduled to be part of that race in World Rally Championships. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens as we bring in Ben to get into the grid ranking.
Thank you, Joe. Week 6 of the grid ranking, and like you just were talking about, Sebastian Ogier continues to lead after winning Rally Portugal. He has a score of 21.14, and out of these 3 starts, 3 podiums, 2 of them being wins. Now, in the WRC rating, he is third behind Neuville and Evans. Tanak is only 4 points behind, and Adrian Formey is 22 points behind in 5th place there, as you see the full screen. I'm just trying to do the math in my head. I think the script might be off a little bit because that looks like it's 47 points behind, or excuse me, he's 22 behind Ogier. There we go, 47 behind the lead with Terry Neuville. So getting my points right there, and we'll throw this question over to Joe now. How long can Ogier stay in the top 5 of the WRC rating to stay in the grid ranking?
That seems to be a really hard question to answer because he's going to be in Rally Italy. So assuming he has another strong performance, podium, he's going to be up there more. He has another race schedule. But really, after those 2 races, what's the rest of the competition going to do? Because it's not like Sebastian Ogier has a person that's going out there and getting multiple wins with him. Thierry Neuville is the only driver running full-time that has a win this year. If none of the other full-time drivers could get a win, which will be really impossible unless Thierry Neuville keeps winning, he could be up there for quite some time. It's just a matter of how his schedule works out, what the other drivers could do. each race weekend, it's going to be really interesting because when he does fall out of that top 5, grid ranking's wide open just about.
Yeah, definitely, Joe. And I agree, it is a hard question to ask, but it just shows you how good Sebastian Ogier is. And if he keeps winning in his select races that he's running this season, it would not surprise me if we see him stay in the WRC grid rating longer than we all expect. It's just been incredible to watch a driver who's part-time, run as well as he's running. And I believe this goes back to the larger theme of what we've been talking about, Joe, that we need to see these full-time riders, out there winning all of these races instead of, the part-time guys like Ogier and Kali Rovanperä, just coming in winning, like every now and then, because it really seems like, that WRC is still having that identity crisis that we've been talking about for over a year now. And I'm interested to see how this goes moving forward.
And looking at the rest of the standings, the first full-time driver is the one in second. That's Alex Palou. Now, Palou's worst finish in a points race this year is 5th place, but his win from the pole yesterday propelled him up to second in the grid ranking. Palou has a 100% top 5 finish rate in IndyCar. The last time Palou did not finish in the top 10, Kobe brought this up during the IndyCar section, that was Portland in 2022, so well over a year ago when he finished 12th. Kobe, considering IndyCar is seen as one of the most competitive series globally compared to Formula One, especially where Max Verstappen's always expected to at least finish on the podium, does this make Palou's stats that much more impressive?
Yeah, definitely. And I actually think Alex Palou still doesn't get the respect that he deserves for being the great race car driver that he is. Because if you look at the speeds from practice, qualifying, and the race and all the lap times, IndyCar is extremely close. All the way from the top to the bottom of the field, and it's not like he's on a Red Bull where he's going to be over a second faster and he's going to win this race by like 25, 30 seconds sometimes. That doesn't happen. Alex Palou he's just really good at what he does, and the chemistry that he has with that number 10 team has been very impressive. So I was really glad when it was announced that this group was going to stay together instead of him going over to McLaren, because it really seems like Alex Palou and Chip Ganassi racing that number 10 team are setting themselves up to potentially go on a run here. I'm not going to say that he could eventually beat a Jimmy Johnson of IndyCar and go win 5 championships in a row, but I think Alex Palou is certainly driving extremely well right now, and I'm just impressed that he hasn't had anything go terribly wrong with him. And even in races, when something happened, he still finds a way to salvage the day and get a top 10 finish. This is a really good race car driver. I feel like he needs to get more respect, and I have a feeling as time goes on, he's finally going to get that recognition.
I 100% agree with you, Kobe. I think he is. A lot of folks underestimate his talent, what he does, because IndyCar, yes, it's one of the most competitive series. No doubt, Chip Ganassi Racing, one of the best teams out there. They could go out there and get wins. But you bring up Jimmy Johnson. Alex Palou at one point had Jimmy Johnson, Scott Dixon, Marcus Ericsson as teammates. That could have easily, especially if somebody new to the team, almost be in a way very intimidating. But he took that as a big learning opportunity, went out there, got the championship. He is just phenomenal what he's been doing at IndyCar, a series where one of the quotes that always stood out for me a couple of years ago when IndyCar had to start the season at Barber Motorsport Park, Colton Herta involved in a crash on the opening lap. He said, well, everyone's going to have a mulligan. Everyone's going to have one bad race. Alex Palou is not having these bad races. When your worst finish was an 8th place last year, when you've been finishing the top 10 since Portland 2022, that everybody else cannot have a bad race no more. You got to really step it up. Alex Palou is doing something we haven't seen in IndyCar in such a long time. Last year, he wrapped up the championship for the first time in over a decade. The IndyCar championship was wrapped up early, not at the last race. So what he is doing is very impressive in such a competitive series, because we all anticipate Max Verstappen to go out there, get everything, wins, dominate. Palou, not be as flashy as dominating a race like on a Verstappen level, but those stats, there's just something where 3 years ago, somebody told me any driver could have this kind of streak in IndyCar, I would have said, no way. Palou is doing it. What an impressive job.
And Joe, I'm glad you brought up the point about him having Scott Dixon and Jimmy Johnson as teammates at one point, because Palou even said himself, that having access to those championship winning drivers and legends of the sport, like he said, he picked their brains. He talked to Scott Dixon and Jimmy Johnson, pick their brains about, that championship pedigree and what it takes, to win a championship and like what to do in this moment, at that moment. So it really seems like, Alex Palou wanted to be a student of the game, and he took in all of this information like a sponge. I think he's basically using what the teacher taught him and using them against the teacher now, with Scott Dixon. And for so many years, Scott Dixon has not only been one of the faces of IndyCar, but the face of the ultimate face of Chip Ganassi Racing. And with Scott, I have a feeling when Scott Dixon decides to retire, assuming Palou is still going to be in IndyCar and at Ganassi, I think Palou is setting himself up very nicely, to take over, as obviously not just one of the new faces of the IndyCar series, but also the face of Chip Ganassi Racing as well. So I think that everything that Palou learned from Scott Dixon on the IndyCar side of things and Jimmy Johnson from the championship side of things as well, from his impressive run in NASCAR, I really think that's going to benefit Alex Palou in the future.
I was going to say, I guess Palou had 13 combined major championships, among his teammates. But I think even Tony Kanaan was with Ganassi at the time. I think he's got a championship over in IndyCar. So a lot of championship pedigree all throughout the Ganassi team. And Alex Palou has now had a couple of championships of his own in his resume. And I'm with you, Kobe. I think assuming that he sticks around at Ganassi especially. I mean, can you imagine an alternate timeline where he had jumped over to McLaren? I wonder where his career would be. Maybe he'd still be a championship contender with how strong he's been driving, but I think he's certainly very well positioned at Ganassi to continue to add to that legacy, especially whenever Scott Dixon decides to hang it up, which I think is still probably a few years away. Dixon's still a championship contender every year in his own right until further notice, but Palou certainly deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. Now, 9 drivers across the 7 series in the grid ranking have a 100% top 10 finish rate, only 4 with a 100% top 5 finish rate so far this year. Max Verstappen is not one of them. He's at 83% after his DNF in Australia. But, of course, if he wins so many races like he has the last couple of years, he can still easily close that gap. Ogier will only start a select few races, but if he wins them, his race stats will be hard to beat. Of course, you've got Verstappen, like we just mentioned. You could expect to win so many races, claim the grid ranking world championship for a second year in a row. Then you have Alex Palou, Mr. Consistency, in a series that is very competitive. Will Brown and Brock Feeney dominating, but battling each other, maybe taking wins away from each other in supercars. And then you've got the dynamic of Ogier, who's still just running part-time, but whenever he runs, seems to be in contention for the win and end up winning most of these races. So, Joe, what do you think of this new dynamic that we're seeing here in the grid ranking? Is it making it more unpredictable for the favorite to win the grid ranking world championship? And then you've got SVG now over in the Xfinity series, which isn't even part of the grid ranking.
Yeah, if SVG a couple of years ago just dominated. Last year, Max Verstappen dominated. Now it's like you have all this different dynamics where we all expect Max Verstappen to go out there just win, win, win. Well, now Lando Norris has to win. Can Ferrari do something? It's going to be really interesting to see how dominant Max Verstappen is going to be. He will still be dominant, no doubt, but it's going to be, can he have that same level as last year? If he doesn't, can Alex Palou stay consistent? Could he get some wins? I mean, we talked about him dominating last year, but it was not the level of Max Verstappen. Of course, IndyCar, he could have a bad race and next thing you know, a slide going, fall down. Will Brown, Brock Feeney, those are 2 drivers that are surprising me. I thought there'll be a little bit more competition, but with everything going on in supercars, Erebus not living up to what they had last year, those 2 I think could be battling each other. Then Ogier just shows up, he wins, he still leads. It has made it to where last year, I think we all knew pretty much from the 3rd week where it's like, okay, Max Verstappen is just going to lead every single weekend of the grid ranking, and he did. The year before, we knew Shane Van Gisbergen was pretty much going to dominate. We had 1 lead change between him and Scott McLaughlin that year. Now I don't know what's going to happen this next weekend when we have Formula 1. We anticipate Max Verstappen is going to be the heavy favorite, but can McLaren or Ferrari step it up? What's going to happen in supercars? It is really adding a new dynamic and just very interesting seeing the different approaches of a very dominant driver, a consistent driver, 2 teammates battling. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely, Joe. It's a lot of fun. And while I still think Max Verstappen is ultimately going to walk away with the Formula One World Championship this year, on the grid ranking side of things, at the very least, is keeping things very interesting, especially with the upgraded car that McLaren brought to Miami. Hopefully, that upgraded car is going to allow them to challenge for wins. I'm not going to say on a more regular basis, but more often than they have been in the past. But certainly with all of the different things going on in the other series in the grid ranking, it really just keeps your head spinning. This might be one of the craziest, most unpredictable years that we've ever seen in the grid ranking up to this date, with this driver and this driver dominating, and then you have the part-time driver OJ coming where he wins and hurts the full-time drivers in the World Rally Championship grid rate. And this is a really crazy dynamic, and I think it's going to make the grid ranking even more interesting in the fall of this year.
And moving on now, Pedro Acosta fell out of the grid ranking after his DNF, and in the grid ranking for the first time since 2019 is Marc Marquez. Now, no rookies in the grid ranking at the moment, but let's talk about Memorial Day weekend this year. 2 weekends away, absolutely stacked with racing. Obviously, you have Formula One at Monaco, 2 Formula E races in Shanghai. MotoGP will be back at Barcelona. And then, of course, the 2 big races in the United States, the Coca-Cola World 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and the biggest of them all, the Indianapolis 500 at IMS. Now, for Americans, this is a big holiday weekend, and we have a common tradition. Many like to say breakfast at Monaco, lunch at Indianapolis, and then dinner at Charlotte. Now, I guess if you're a race fan of series all around the world, you maybe have a brunch as well now, and a midnight food run, perhaps with Barcelona and Shanghai, respectively. Kobe, you said, I think earlier in the show, who doesn't want more racing here? But do you feel like maybe for this particular weekend, such a big weekend already with 3 crown jewel races, do we have a problem? Is there such thing as a problem as too many races on Memorial Day weekend?
Well, I guess if you're like a media outlet like Grid Network, it might be a problem considering that we cover all of these different racing series. So try to stay up and keep on top of all of them might be a little difficult for us on the media side of things. But if you're just a race fan who just love racing so much, then this is be a very special weekend for you. It seems like there's always something for everyone on this Memorial Day racing weekend. But preferably, I'd rather just focus on Formula One at Monaco, and the Indy 500 and NASCAR at Charlotte for the Coke 600, but I had these other races as well. It's certainly going to be a lot more challenging to keep up with it all. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a problem. It's going to be hard for me to keep up with all of it, I must admit. But hey, it'll give us a lot to talk about here on our Grid Network programming.
A lot to talk about. Joshua Buescher is going to have a very busy weekend talking about all these races. I mean, boy, that sleep schedule is going to be something else, but overall, for our diehard fans of motorsports, this just, I think, adds on to it, where you got these additional races. It's almost just around-the-clock racing. This is just something where I think it adds on to it. Yeah, it's going to be more work, especially media outlets that cover all of them, like us. Joshua Buescher, as I mentioned, he's going to have a busy race weekend. But so many great storylines, and I think overall, it just adds on to it. The big thing, though, I feel, especially since it is an American holiday, it's going to be really hard for the other races outside the Indy 500, Coke 600, Monaco to really gain traction. We don't see MotoGP, Formula E trying to make a tradition of being on this race weekend. It'll be really interesting to see if they could get more of that audience capture, because they know, hey, there's these 3 big races. The timing, we're not going to compete, but we're before. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. But for right now, I'm happy with it. I'm looking forward to that weekend. I'm just thrilled that already we're only 2 weekends away from it.
I don't know. Last year, I had a hard enough time getting up in time for the Grand Prix of Monaco. I don't think I'm getting up that early or staying up that late, whatever it is, for some racing in Shanghai. But certainly lots of racing. I guess take your pick. Whatever series is your favorite, you've got no shortage of things to enjoy in just a couple of weeks' time. So we'll look forward to that. In the meantime, let's talk about what we enjoyed this weekend. Kobe, take it away for our One Shining Moment segment.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, time for our great One Shining Moment of this racing weekend. So down in the chat below, if you're watching, let us know what stood out to you from all the racing series that were in action this weekend. And Joe, I'm going to start off with you.
My shining moment is going to come from IndyCar, and that is going to be Alex Palou he is just proven to everyone he is, once again, the real deal for the championship, for the Indy 500. Very likely he's going to be one of the contenders for the pole. And I think he is just on top of it. He's becoming the new face of IndyCar. He brought DHL a victory. It had been such a long time since DHL had been a victory lane. I don't remember the exact year, but what an organization to sponsor Alex Palou, be in victory lane. And of course, Alex Palou, first win now as a father. Wishing all the moms out there a happy Mother's Day weekend. Alex Palou is going to be a star in IndyCar. He is made for that Chip Ganassi team, DHL sponsorship. We talk about marketing. He could be definitely, I think, market on a level where could bring in new fans internationally. So Alex Palou, what he's doing, he is my shining moment from the weekend.
Unless he was running an alternate livery that weekend, I would think it would be Sonoma 2018, the season finale. Ryan Hunter-Reay won that. That was his last win in the DHL car. Of course, Roman Grosjean still looking for his first career win. So I believe that would be the answer to that question, Joe. It's certainly been a long time since DHL was in IndyCar victory lane, and good to see that again for how much they've meant to the sport, not just at Andretti for so many years, but now with Palou at Ganassi. I want to give a call to Justin Haley. I got to tell you, this guy must have seen something that we didn't, making the jump from colleague racing over to Rick Ware. I know they have some support from RFK now as well, but he has certainly put in some quality drives, and to finish 9th place today on complete merit. It's not like he timed the weather right and then it was rain shortened or had some sort of crazy fuel mileage strategy work to his advantage. Totally on merit, a 9th place finish today. That is a victory, I think, for everybody at Rick Ware Racing. And again, when you also look at where colleagues been running this year, I think maybe you could even argue it's been a step up for Justin Haley this year, and the direction that his career might be headed. Who knows if there's a future lined up at RFK. I know Brad Keselowski just confirmed today that Chris Buescher's on lock at that team for an extension now, but we keep hearing these rumors about Stuart Haas and the charters and the situation going on with Ford. Who knows if there might be a future opportunity lined up for Justin Haley down the road, or maybe he might not need it. Rick Ware might turn into a team that can contend for results like this on a more regular basis. So congratulations to him. A great run today. 9th place. That's my one shining moment.
And I'm going to give my shining moment to the great battle we saw in the closing stages at Darlington between the RFK teammates, Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, and Tyler Reddick. I thought that three-way battle was very impressive. It was honestly Darlington at its best, and it kept you on the edge of your seat. Everything that we were seeing, I thought it was just an overall great race at the Lady in Black at a track that's too tough to tame. And then we saw the conflict on pit road between Chris Buescher and Tyler Reddick at the end of the race. So I'll keep people talking all throughout the week leading up to All-Star Weekend at North Wilkesboro Speedway. And also want to give a second shining moment to Josh Berry for getting a 3rd place finish in that number 4 Stewart Haas Racing Ford. It's been a difficult rookie season for Berry up until this point, but and to run the way that he was running, and he was actually closing on Keselowski and Gibbs at the end. So I can't help but wonder if Berry had maybe 10, 15 more laps, if he could have had anything for Brad Keselowski there. I just thought it was definitely a good confidence booster for Berry, as we go to the short track at North Wilkesboro, which is his bread and butter.
A lot of great moments. We encourage everyone to comment with your shining moments. And of course, definitely like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs. We got Grid Encore tomorrow. Ben and Brandon recapping the NASCAR Xfinity Truck Series, Indy next. And of course, we have ARCA. They were running the ARCA East Series at Nashville. Plenty to talk about tomorrow. Grid tonight. They got shows on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to recap all the coverage at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And of course, the regular program on Wednesday. Women in Motorsports will be on the air Friday. And then we do this all over again with the pre-race and the wrap-up. And a big thank you to our Patreon investors. Come the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in us each and every month. Link in the video description so you can invest in us. And a big thank you to everyone at the Grid Network team. Of course, Edward staying up late, Alex, Isha, everyone that was on the air this week. Big thanks to everyone for making this all work, and we hope you all enjoy the coverage from all of us right here at the Grid Network. For Ben, Kobe, Alex, and Ed who were on the air earlier, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.